Some stories don't begin with shouting or slammed doors. They begin with silence. The kind of silence that grows between two people who once knew each other by heart. This is not a story about sudden rage or reckless revenge. It's about patience, observation, and the slow unraveling of truth. I'm sharing this not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. When betrayal hides behind routine, it can feel harmless at first. That illusion almost broke me. What follows is my confession, from the moment doubt first crept in, to the point where I realized love doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes quietly. And sometimes, the most powerful response isn't confrontation, but waiting long enough for the truth to expose itself. Cheating looked harmless at first. At least that's what I told myself during the quiet months when my marriage felt routine and predictable. Like a song played so often, it faded into background noise. Mark and I lived in a small Ohio town where people waved at stop signs and nothing ever really changed. And maybe that was the problem. We had been married for 11 years, no children, steady jobs, familiar habits. Every morning followed the same pattern: coffee brewing, shoes by the door, a quick kiss that had slowly turned into a polite habit. When Mark started working late, I didn't question it. I told myself careers demanded sacrifice. I told myself love matured into calm, not excitement. Still, something felt off long before I could name it. I noticed the distance before I noticed the lies. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped touching my hand at dinner. He stopped looking at me when I spoke, like my voice had become background noise. One night I asked casually, "Everything okay at work?" "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just busy. Busy every night." I smiled, trying to keep it light. He shrugged. "Deadlines don't care about time." I laughed, but it sounded hollow even to me. The space between us felt heavier each evening. He brought his phone to the bathroom. He set it face down on the table. When it buzzed, he'd glance at it, smile, and then tuck it away like a secret he didn't want to explain. I didn't accuse him because I didn't want to sound paranoid. I didn't want to be that woman. I wanted to believe love didn't fade so easily. But small things began to stack up like unpaid bills of trust. A credit card charge for a restaurant I'd never been to. When I asked, he said, "Client dinner." Another charge appeared the following week. "Same client," he said, without looking up. One evening, while I was washing dishes, his phone rang. I heard a woman's laugh through the speaker before he rushed into the room and silenced it. "Who was that?" I asked, drying my hands. "Wrong number," he replied too fast. Sounded friendly for a wrong number. "You're imagining things," he said, irritation creeping into his voice. That word stuck with me, imagining. Like my instincts were something unreliable, something silly. That night, I lay awake listening to the clock tick, replaying every moment, wondering if I was slowly losing my mind. The silence between us felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. Days passed, then weeks. Mark became a guest in our home. He ate quickly. He showered immediately after coming home. He slept facing the wall. When I tried to talk, he said, "Not now," or "I'm tired," or "Can we do this later?" Later never came. One Saturday morning, I tried again. "Mark, I miss you," I said softly. He sighed. "We're fine. Fine isn't the same as close." "You're overthinking again," he replied. Overthinking. Another word added to the pile. I started doubting myself more than I doubted him, and that scared me. I began paying attention in small ways. I noticed how he dressed better for work. I noticed a new cologne. I noticed he hummed sometimes, like someone happy, like someone living a life I wasn't invited into. When I asked why he seemed lighter, he said, "Just feeling motivated." Motivated to leave me out, I thought, but never said aloud. Then came the night that changed everything. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Rain tapped against the windows. I was folding laundry on the bed, matching socks we'd owned for years, when Mark's phone lit up beside me. He was in the shower. The screen flashed a name I didn't recognize, followed by a red heart emoji. I stared at it like it might disappear if I blinked. My hands froze mid-fold. My chest tightened. The phone buzzed again, and again. "Who is that?" I whispered to the empty room. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't open the message. I just stared, feeling something inside me crack quietly. When Mark came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, he reached for the phone too quickly. "Who was texting?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "No one," he said. "It buzzed 3 times." "Work group chat," he replied. "With hearts." He paused for half a second too long. "You're reading into things," he said, walking past me. That was the moment I knew, not because of proof but because of his eyes. they wouldn't meet mine. Cheating didn't look dramatic. It looked subtle. It looked like avoidance. It looked like my husband choosing comfort over honesty. As he climbed into bed and turned off the light, my mind raced. I realized this wasn't harmless anymore. This was a fracture spreading beneath the surface, and if I ignored it, it would eventually swallow me whole. I stared at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, and made a quiet promise to myself. I would stop guessing. I would stop imagining. I would find the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I didn't confront him right away. I needed proof, not excuses, and I needed to see the truth laid bare before I let my emotions run wild. For the next week, I moved carefully, quietly, almost like a detective in my own home. I memorized his schedule, watched for inconsistencies, noticed the little signs he thought I would miss. Emails left open on his laptop, a tablet he forgot to close, screenshots of messages that seemed innocent until you read them closely. Every interaction started to make sense in hindsight. The quick phone calls, the nervous smiles, the sudden late nights at work that coincided with a certain pattern. My stomach twisted as the word affair became unavoidable, heavy in my mind, impossible to ignore. I sat down one evening with a notebook. I need to write this all down, I whispered to myself. I documented every detail, every inconsistency, every little moment that pointed to a betrayal I didn't want to admit. When Mark came home, I asked casually, "Busy day?" "Same as always," he said, tossing his keys in the dish. "I noticed you didn't eat lunch," I said. "Skipped it," he muttered. I nodded, smiling as if I believed him. I didn't want to give anything away. Later, while he was in the shower, I found the thread of messages that confirmed everything. I could feel my chest tighten as I scrolled. Heart emojis, inside jokes, photos of places I didn't recognize. The woman didn't know I existed, at least she thought so. My hands shook. I whispered to myself, "So it's real. It's all real." That night after dinner, I approached him quietly. "Mark," I said, calm, controlled. "Who is she?" He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean the woman in your messages. The one with the heart emojis. Who is she?" He blinked rapidly. It's nothing, just someone I met at work." "At work?" I raised my eyebrows. "She doesn't work here." It's complicated," he stammered. I stayed calm. "Mark, I need honesty, please." He looked down, sighing. It's an affair. I didn't plan for this to happen. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix months of lies," I said softly. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, voice cracking. "I know you didn't, but you did." I showed him the messages, piece by piece, letting the evidence speak. The room was silent. He didn't protest, didn't defend himself. He just looked small, ashamed, caught in the truth he thought he could avoid. "I didn't plan to leave you," he said finally. "It meant nothing. It was just escape." "Temporary, temporary," I repeated, voice barely above a whisper. "You think my trust is temporary?" I made a mistake," he said, tears forming. "A mistake you repeated," I pointed out. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the evidence between us like a wall. "I want transparency now," I said. "I want honesty, no more secrets." "I'll end it," he promised. "I swear, no more lies. I'll fix this." I nodded slowly, acting like I believed him while something inside me hardened. I reached for his hand when he tried to touch mine. Then I pulled away. "I'm listening, but I'm not done," I said softly. The following days were an exercise in patience. I observed him silently, watched for cracks, for signs of his duplicity. He tried to act normal, went to work, smiled at me, pretended the house was just like it always had been. But I noticed. I noticed the way he hid his phone, the nervous glances, the careful wording in conversations. I started asking subtle questions, questions about his day, about colleagues, about who he spent time with. He dodged, hesitated, answered vaguely. One morning, I confronted him casually over coffee. "You were late yesterday. Who did you meet?" "Just a client," he replied. "I thought the client was on vacation," I said lightly. "Oh, they called in." "Nothing major," he said quickly, trying to brush it off. Every evasive answer confirmed my suspicions. I documented it all meticulously, keeping everything in a secure folder. I even took screenshots of his online activity he didn't realize I could access. Each revelation was like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place, showing a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. "Mark," I said one evening, "you need to tell me everything." "I told you," he said, frustrated. "No," I said, "everything, no holding back, I deserve the truth." I can't." "It's complicated," he said. Then maybe I need to see the evidence myself, I said calmly, holding my phone. His face went pale. He realized then that the game was over. His carefully constructed lies were exposed. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he whispered. Too late, I said softly. You've crossed the line. In the quiet moments that followed, I understood something crucial. He thought my pain was temporary, something I'd eventually forgive. But forgiveness without accountability wasn't an option. I stayed calm, detached, observing him, noting every defensive twitch, every hesitation. I let him talk, let him explain, while I held the folder of proof close to my chest, a silent reminder that the truth would not be denied. Do you love her? I asked quietly. I don't know, he admitted. And me? You know I do, he said, but it sounded hollow. I smiled faintly, though it wasn't a warm smile. Love isn't enough when trust is gone, I said. Days turned into a week. I let him believe that things might return to normal, that he had a second chance. I nodded when he tried to apologize, when he held my hand and promised to do better. But inside, I was already planning my next steps. Karma, I realized, doesn't rush. It doesn't need force. It waits. And I wasn't about to wait forever, but I would wait long enough for the truth to do its work. I started to organize everything, timelines of his late nights, conversations, evidence of the affair. I spoke to a friend in confidence, someone I trusted completely, to confirm I wasn't overreacting. They assured me that what I had discovered was real, undeniable, and that I had every right to protect myself and plan carefully. Mark, I said one night, you need to understand how serious this is. I do, he replied. I swear I'll end it. You will, I said, letting the words hang in the air. The tension in our home was palpable. Every glance, every word, every action carried weight. I realized the depth of betrayal is not in a single act, but in the layers of deception. I watched him navigate his lies with careful steps, unaware that I was already mapping every move he had made. One evening, I whispered to myself as I reviewed the messages again, "You're going to answer for every lie." And in that quiet, while he slept beside me, I made a promise. This wasn't about punishment, it was about truth, about justice, about showing him, and everyone involved, that deception has consequences. The week ended with him promising transparency once more, while I remained calm, composed, and fully aware that the real reckoning hadn't even begun. It was only a matter of time. The storm was quietly building, and when it broke, it wouldn't be sudden. It would be inevitable. Revenge wasn't about anger anymore. It had become about clarity, control, and timing. After weeks of observing Mark, I realized that confronting him head-on with rage would have achieved nothing. It would have given him an excuse to deflect, to cry, to manipulate. No, this time, I would let the truth reveal itself naturally, while I remained calm, collected, and painfully patient. On the surface, I played the forgiving wife, the one who wanted to rebuild, who smiled at him over breakfast and said, "We'll get through this." But behind closed doors, I organized every piece of evidence, every message, every lie, into a detailed timeline that no one could argue with. I started inviting him to small gatherings again, casual dinners with friends and family, always carefully observing how he acted when he thought no one was paying attention. I noticed the little tells. How his hand twitched when his phone buzzed, how he shifted uncomfortably when someone mentioned late nights or travel. He didn't stop seeing her, he just got sloppier. The more reckless he became, the more I saw his entire double life exposed by his own carelessness. One evening, while he thought I was asleep, I found a new message thread. He hadn't learned caution. "Are you free tonight?" it read. I closed the phone, heart steady, lips pressed tight. The twist came when I realized something he never intended. She didn't know about me. She believed she was the only one. That mistake made everything possible. I began planning the next move with precision. I sent out invitations to his parents for a small dinner under the guise of celebrating our anniversary. I suggested Mark bring his phone to take photos of the evening. Everything appeared ordinary. I even helped him pick out a tie, smiled as he nervously fussed over his collar, and encouraged him to relax. On the outside, he saw a woman willing to forgive, a life that could be restored. On the inside, I was setting the stage for his unraveling. The night arrived, the table set with candles and our best china. His parents arrived, cheerful and unsuspecting, eager to celebrate what they thought was a turning point in our marriage. Mark's phone buzzed constantly, but he kept it hidden in his pocket. Dinner conversation flowed, safe topics, laughter, stories from the past. I played my part perfectly, laughing lightly at his father's jokes, nodding at his mother's anecdotes, encouraging Mark to engage, all while my heart thrummed with anticipation. Halfway through the meal, his phone buzzed again. He tried to ignore it, subtly reaching for it under the table. But I wasn't watching him, I was watching his mother, who noticed a familiar notification pop up on the screen. Mark, she asked casually, who's texting you this much tonight? He froze. It's just a friend, he mumbled. Oh, she said, eyebrows raised. Seems like more than a friend. I slowly slid the folder onto the table, letting the evidence fall into plain view. Every message, every photo, every proof of deception laid out calmly, methodically. Mark's face drained of color. What how? He stammered, staring at the folder. You told me to trust you, I said softly, so I did. I collected everything for clarity. His parents gasped. Mark, his father said, voice low, incredulous. Is this true? His mother asked, shaking. Mark's attempts to explain fell flat. The mistress, still unaware she was part of this web, received a copied message I had carefully written to both of them, explaining the situation calmly, without accusation but with undeniable clarity. She read it at the same time, the room went silent. Her phone buzzing, confusion and shame crossing her face as she realized the reality she had unknowingly stepped into. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Mark whispered, voice breaking. Yet here we are, I said quietly. The moment was surreal. The power of observation, patience, and careful planning had exposed everything, not through shouting or confrontation, but by letting his own carelessness do the work. I sat back, feeling neither joy nor cruelty, only satisfaction that truth had its place, and that deceit could not hide forever. You should have told me the truth months ago, I said softly, addressing him, but also the silence that had accumulated between us. We might have fixed this. I was scared, he admitted, voice trembling. Scared of losing her. No, scared of losing you, he whispered, tears forming. I'm already gone, I said simply. Every face at the table looked at him in disbelief. His parents, hurt and disappointed, could finally see what I had endured in silence. The mistress, reading the messages on her phone, realized she had been manipulated, unaware of the marriage she had stepped into. The beauty of the moment wasn't in humiliation, it was in revelation. The truth had done its work. I maintained my composure, explaining everything clearly, without anger, without theatrics. The messages, the timelines, the repeated lies, all of it painted a picture Mark could no longer deny. I listened as he attempted to justify, to explain, to beg for understanding. But each explanation collided with facts, and the weight of his deception became undeniable. You chose her over me, I said finally. Not once, not twice, but over and over. I didn't mean to, he said, and yet you did. The rest of the evening passed in stunned silence. His parents left with heavy hearts. The mistress departed confused and ashamed, and Mark sat at the table, stripped of excuses. I felt no vindictive pleasure, only the calm satisfaction that patience, strategy, and clarity had exposed the truth fully. The twist, the timing, the methodical plan, all had worked. He had thought he could navigate both worlds without consequence. Karma, it seemed, had impeccable timing. As I closed the folder and collected myself, I realized something profound. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits for the moment when truth is undeniable. And in that silence, in that stillness, it becomes far more powerful than anger ever could. Mark looked at me finally, broken, understanding that the questions weren't coming from me anymore, and that there was no escape from the truth I had patiently let unfold. And in that moment, I understood the power of quiet, calculated justice. The truth changed everything, not with shouting or confrontation, but with the quiet weight of undeniable evidence. That night after his parents left, after the mistress had withdrawn, Mark sat across from me, drained, exposed, and unable to speak. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand apologies. I simply let the room breathe, letting the silence echo the consequences of his actions. The revelation had done what confrontation never could. It stripped away excuses, defenses, and manipulations. I watched as the weight of his betrayal settled on him fully, and I felt something shift inside me. A deep, hard clarity that this was not about anger or vengeance, but about truth and self-preservation. Over the following weeks, karma seemed to follow him like a shadow he could no longer escape. At work, his colleagues began to notice his distracted demeanor, the awkward glances, the phone calls he thought private. The mistress tried to reach out, asking questions, only to learn she had been caught in a lie she hadn't even known existed. Friends and neighbors, hearing fragments of truth, stared at him differently, their eyes weighing him with judgment he could no longer charm away. Mark's carefully curated world, built on lies, began to crumble under the quiet scrutiny of everyone he thought would never know. I watched from a distance, not with glee, but with the calm knowledge that deceit has a natural expiry. Every lie leaves a trail. Every secret whispers eventually, and when it does, there is no hiding. I focused on myself during this time, rediscovering the life I had almost lost to doubt and betrayal. Therapy helped me untangle emotions that had grown into knots over months of lies. I walked alone in the evenings, feeling the cool Ohio air on my face, reminding myself that I was no longer bound to fear, to suspicion, or to him. I reconnected with old friends, laughed without reservation, and embraced moments that once felt hollow. I realized that revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like stepping aside, observing patiently, and allowing truth to carry its own justice. Mark had thought he could manipulate the narrative, but his carelessness, paired with my patience, had rewritten the story for him. One evening, he tried to apologize. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly, voice trembling. "I never meant for any of this." I looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who had lost more than he imagined. But I was no longer the frightened, questioning wife I had once been. "It's too late for apologies," I said softly. "I'm not the one who needs convincing anymore. I needed the truth and I have it." He nodded, defeated, silent. I walked away from the conversation, feeling a freedom I hadn't known in months. Months later, when life had settled into a new rhythm, I reflected on the lessons betrayal had taught me. The pain had been real, but so had the growth. I had learned my worth, the importance of patience, and the power of truth. Mark tried again, reaching out with messages, with hesitant conversations, but by then I had already moved forward. I focused on my life, my peace, and my clarity. The betrayal had been a turning point, the karma a mirror, and the lessons invaluable. Cheating may seem harmless in the shadows, but when the truth emerges, it always asks questions no one can avoid. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I chose myself, and in choosing myself, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had. The moral is simple yet profound. Trust once broken may be repaired, but only when honesty guides every step. Betrayal leaves traces. Lies, no matter how subtle, eventually surface. And revenge, when executed with patience and clarity, doesn't need rage. It only needs truth. I learned that power isn't in exposing someone through fury, but in surviving, observing, and letting the consequences unfold naturally. Mark's world was forever changed, and so was mine, but in the quiet aftermath, I found peace. I learned that the most satisfying karma is not in retaliation, but in reclaiming your life with dignity, resilience, and unwavering self-respect.